Okay, folks, so I have for you today my first impressions of the fast attack section of the new Eldar codex. Now, once again, keep in mind, this is just my first thoughts on the codex after having read it. I haven't played with a lot of these things yet. These are just my first thoughts. So let's get right into the first unit that I want to talk about, which is the Swooping Hawks. Some really big changes to these guys that make them a lot more compelling than the previous codex. The first single biggest change is that they are much, much cheaper. You're not really dumping a boatload of points into a small unit of these guys anymore. You're actually getting a pretty good cheap unit for good cost, and that makes them compelling instantly, because anytime you've got something that's cheap, that makes it much more likely to not hurt the rest of your list when it's fewer points to field it. Now, first off, some huge change on these guys. Their blast is AP4, ignores cover all the time. If you have 5 or less guys in the unit, it's a small blast. If you have 6 or more guys in the unit, it's a large blast. Ignores line of sight when it fires. Pretty cool weapon. Really deadly against guardsmen and any kind of army that has significant numbers of AP 4+ armor or worse troops. They like to hang out and cover. Great free shot when you come in the movement phase. The next way these guys have changed is their regular guns have gone to 3 shots instead of 2. Now, mind you, they're only strength 3 guns, but those 3 shots from a single model, that's gonna cause a lot of damage on certain armies. Any army that has toughness 3, that's gonna really hurt them. That's a nice thing to see, and the range is still very good on those guns, like it's always been. Next thing is that they've maintained their haywire grenades, and those haywire grenades, as we know, are absolutely deadly to vehicles in 6th edition. So if these guys survive long enough to assault a vehicle, no matter what vehicle it is, armor 14, doesn't matter, it's really in danger of these guys. They are a huge threat on the board, potentially, depending on what kind of army you're facing, and they're cheap. They're the best kind of threat that you can think of, because they're very cheap and very deadly at what they do, assuming they have the right kind of targets to go after. Now, a couple of other great things about them. They never scatter when they deep strike. That's a beautiful, beautiful thing. My biggest problem with these guys, actually, even though I started using them a little bit in 6th edition, was that they would scatter. Like I was trying to get close enough to throw throw that one haywire grenade at something. Well, a lot of times it would scatter onto it and be destroyed or back into reserve, whatever it was. No more of that nonsense. You land where you land with these guys all the time. Very cool ability. Skyleap, you can't land and take off in the same turn anymore, but that's fair enough, because they made the grenade pack much more powerful. And it's still an ability there, so if you see these guys about to get assaulted by something and you have a turn free, you can jump them off the table, assuming they didn't come down the turn before. Very interesting unit. Now, one way to use them is when you deep strike them, you drop your grenade, you launch it. Then in the shooting phase, because they also have battle focus, you don't want to be piled around in a giant circle where a single blast can hit all of the guys in the unit. So use your battle focus to shoot and then run to spread out once you've landed with your grenade pack. Very cool with these guys right now. I'm pretty impressed. I'm pretty interested in fielding them, seeing what kind of toolkit they can add to my army. And I think you should consider maybe taking at least some small 5 or 6 man units in your army for the points. Let's talk next about another unit that saw huge boosts, and that is the Warp Spiders. These guys are really, really compelling right now. First off, their gun has that sort of AP1 pseudo-rending ability on 6s. It becomes strength 7 against low initiative or vehicles, which is really, really cool. These guys can actually really hurt armor 12 vehicles now. That includes flyers, because they have double shots. The range on their gun hasn't changed, but it's just as deadly as before, and it's even more deadly now, because the strength can go up potentially, and you can potentially get AP1 on 6s. That's pretty impressive. Second of all, they come with hit and run for free, already built in, and they're cheaper. They're several points cheaper than they used to be. Now, unfortunately, my favorite strategy in the past was to put fortune on these guys, and you cannot, as we know, guarantee fortune anymore. So that's going to be a real challenge to keep them alive, but the cheaper cost of them helps with that a little bit. It doesn't hurt as much when they die. And the thing you want to think about with these guys is, and I didn't mention with the Swooping Hawks, you can take an Exarch. There are some options for it. I don't find any of the Exarch options on these guys all that compelling, other than the fact that with Ballistic Skill 5, when your blast comes down, your grenade pack, it'll help keep it a little bit more accurate. That is one potential use. But I'm not terribly crazy about all the weapon options. With these guys, I think you can field them without an Exarch, but the Exarch does have some very interesting options. The first option is that you can take a fast shot on your Exarch. So suddenly you can give him a third shot with his really deadly gun, which as you know is going to be at Ballistic Skill 5 instead of 4. You can also twin link it, unfortunately. Now, I wish you could still take the extra 2 shots, right? But that's gone. Instead, you can twin link that gun for only 5 points. Originally, I thought, man, what a disaster! Why can you not take the 4 shots on him? It's so much, worse or so much better. It would have been than twin linking. However, with the fact that these guys can sort of, kind of pull anti-flyer duty, that twin linked gun is, especially if you have fast shot, is going to be a lot nicer against a flyer if you're shooting at it, because it's much more likely to roll some 6s if you're twin linked than if you just have more shots. So that's pretty interesting. Also, you can also give him power blades, which are going to give you an extra attack into AP3. Now, unlike the old edition that they were AP2, that kind of stuff is gone. But if you do plan to use them aggressively to slam into relatively weak units that they've shot up, then it might be really worthwhile to have those power blades to give you a chance to win combats at least, so that you're not getting run off the board, and maybe having a chance to actually use your hit and run. So pretty interesting thing. Now, the spinneret option, the spinneret rifle, changed. It's now rapid fire. So that's interesting. You can get 2 shots with it at short range. So with fast shot, you're firing 3 strength 6 AP1 shots. That's pretty interesting. I don't think it's going to be the weapon of choice necessarily, because you can get AP1 if you roll well enough, but it's something to think about. Now, these guys are jump back infantry. So if you choose to deep strike them, then what you're going to do is, after you've shot something, in order that you're not bunched up and ready to be blasted by something, you're going to use your jetpack move to spread out after you've launched. So using that jetpack move to spread out so you don't get nuked by the first template that comes along. You got to remember that. These guys are very compelling. I can't wait to start using them and seeing all the interesting combos with them. I think you got to keep in mind they're going to be a huge target on the board. Your opponent's going to be gunning for these guys with everything, and with bad toughness and only a standard 3+ kind of heavy armor save, they're going to go down. They are going to go down. And you got to be ready for that. But make that initial strike count, and make your opponent pay for every round that a surviving unit of these guys stays on the board. Last thing to mention, their warp jump generator now can potentially give you insane jump distances. Use in the movement phase instead of the assault phase, and you get 6 plus 2d6 movement, which you could use to assault something. So that's pretty interesting. A lot of interesting stuff going on with these guys. Pretty compelling unit. Very excited about it in this new edition of the Codex. Let's continue on. Shining Spears. I mentioned this earlier, but some very exciting changes to these guys. They're much, much cheaper. 10 points cheaper than they used to be. They come for free with Outflank and Skilled Rider. Skilled Rider is such a great ability to have on jet bikes. And unlike the Dark Eldar ones that have Skilled Rider, these guys actually have a really good armor save, so they die a little bit less. Very compelling unit as well. Just the fact that they're so much cheaper. Their guns are now AP3, so if you show up from outflank and shoot, you can actually really hurt some Marines and Marine equivalent units with shooting before you get into combat. I can't wait to build some of these guys. I'm probably going to start proxying some of my Seer Council on jet bikes, just because I don't foresee myself using them that much anymore, so I'm going to try to proxy them up for these guys for the time being. Pretty interesting unit. Use that outflank. I think outflank is the greatest kind of thing to use for these guys. Have them show up on a side somewhere and just start wreaking havoc. Now keep in mind, you cannot assault on the turn you come out from outflank, so you're going to have to use those Strength 6 AP3 guns to really hurt stuff on the turn you come on. But I think it's worth it. I think a larger unit of these guys, a unit of 9, is worth it, because you can take casualties. I think the Exarch is worth it here. That extra attack is huge. Some of the abilities you can take are very helpful. Probably worth investing in the Exarch over here, even more so than the Warp Spiders, and definitely more so than the Swooping Hawks. Something to think about. Let's talk about the controversial new flyer, the Crimson Hunter in the fast attack slot. First off, the good things about this guy: he is, an absolute killer of other people's flyers. He's going to shred other flyers. Assuming that he comes on second, assuming that the Flyers don't get the jump on him, which is a big assumption anyways. But, 4 strength 8 AP2 shots, I mean, he's going to just cook Flyers, and when all the Flyers are dead, he's going to start cooking stuff on the ground. The biggest problem with him, however, is very high point cost, no defensive abilities. No defensive abilities whatsoever, other than, just being a Flyer. So with his terrible armor 10, he's actually no better than the worst Flyers you can dream up for the cheapest number of points. He's no better defensively than them, which is really sad to see. I wonder why Phil Kelly made that decision. Why would the most advanced aircraft in the Eldar army have no defensive measures whatsoever compared to even just like some loser race? I don't know what you can think of. Well, Orc players are going to be angry at me, but I mean, the Orc Flyers are armor 10 all around. I mean, there's a bunch of other Flyers that are armor 10 all around, and it's just sad that this one is so many points and has no defensive measures. And just to put that in perspective, let me explain it to you this way. A standard army that's relatively competitive, let's just say a Tau army, that has a unit of 10 Fire Warriors in it. Those Fire Warriors, at rapid fire range, which is very likely to be close to this guy at some point because he's flying around the table, are going to get 20 shots. If they have their Ethereal nearby, they can get an extra 1 shot each, which is going to be 30 shots. Those 30 shots are going to average, 6 hits, even though they need 6s to hit you. Sorry, 5 hits, pardon me, not 6 hits. So of those 5 hits, strength 5, armor 10, you're going to really ravage this Flyer. This thing's going to have to jank and pray for the best just to survive a round of shooting from a generic troop unit that has no special abilities against Flyers, and yet this thing is in terrible danger. That's the problem with this Flyer. No defensive measures. You can't even buy defensive abilities on it. So really, you are at the mercy of just whatever volume of fire unit your opponent has. That's strength 4, 5, or 6. I mean, it's going to be in living terror of those things. That said, if you play smart, I think the way to play with these guys is hug the table edge. Keep in mind, all of its guns are extremely long range. We're talking 36-inch range on the side guns, 48-inch range on the other gun. 36 on all of them. What am I talking about? They're a little mix up there, of course. I mean, it's been so long since I used a pulse laser. Pulse laser is 48-inch range. So the thing to remember, you've got long range on these guns. So try to stay as far away from volume of fire shooting that your opponent has as possible. It may not be that possible very often, but try to stay away from units of guys that have short-range guns, but that can pump out tons of strength 4 and 5 shots. That's the way to play this guy. Now, a couple of interesting things about him. If you take the Exarch and you can take things like Marksman's Eye, which actually makes this thing really good at sniping away power fists and things from units if you've killed all the stuff in the sky. There's some interesting options with this guy. He's a lot of points, and he's not going to survive when he needs to. So I'm a little bit worried about him. I'm not crazy about it. I will build one eventually and start playing with him. Maybe my opinion will change, but I'm not loving his survival chances so far. Let's continue on to Vipers. I always liked Vipers. I used them even when people weren't too impressed with them, and they only got better. For the same number of points, the old style with 2 shuriken cannons on it, you have the same number of points, and yet you're ballistic skill 4. I mean, that's a godsend. The other weapon options are all much cheaper, so if you want to go bright lances, I used to like going just single bright lances on these guys, have them fly around as like a really nasty anti-vehicle unit. It's actually much, much cheaper to do that now. It's incredibly cheaper to do that. This despite the fact that for some silly reason, Phil Kelly has made all the guns more expensive on these and on Falcons. Why are the guns 5 points, all the other upgrade versions except for the missile launcher? Why are they all 5 points on a Wave Serpent? That's twin-linked to begin with. And they're all, for some stupid reason, 10 points on these things. I really don't understand his logic on that. That said, the guns are still much cheaper, especially the big expensive guns like Star Cannons and Bright Lances used to be so expensive. Now they're insanely cheaper on these guys. Very compelling unit. Liking them a lot in this new codex. And we do have to still talk about that last fighter, our last thing in the fast attack slot. The Hemlock Wraith fighter, most people, myself included, are not terribly impressed with it. It wants to be kind of an anti-infantry fighter, but it's an insane amount of points. It doesn't tend to do that much damage. It doesn't seem like it'll do that much damage to infantry anyways. The terror ability is sort of highly situational. A lot of armies are completely fearless or won't even care. And I just don't see it being that that useful. That's unfortunate because the model is great, and I think I might actually end up using this little tail fin for my Crimson Hunter. We'll see what I do about that. Not terribly impressed, though, with that one, with the Wraithlock Fighter. What else to talk about here? I think the fast attacks section is very, very exciting, very compelling in this new codex. A lot of the units got better, and it really shows. It really makes you want to take some of these units from the codex. Alright guys, I hope that was helpful and informative in some way, and I'll be back soon with my heavy support first impressions. That's a doozy, that's a big one. So keep watching, and I'll see you guys soon.